Okay, beginning of this session, we'll first introduce the Flutter development system and the Flutter overall development platform. So we will be using this book as kind of a backbone of the set of lectures that I will go over. So be sure that you have access to this book or buy this book. Next thing is to be aware of as you read through this chapter, you'll see that we'll need to eventually get our computer set up with Flutter. So this is the first starting page for Flutter. So click on Get Started, and I will primarily center on using the MacBook as a for the course. But if you are coming from Windows, you will use the Windows instructions. Um, So if you're using the Mac or Windows, we're also in the course be centering on running the app on iOS, on Android. If you're using a MacBook, you can build you can build an Android app or an iOS app or the other platforms. But for the class, we'll primarily be centering on Android because both Windows and Mac users can build Android apps. So if you click on here, what we're going to do is go through these instructions to install Flutter to your local computer. So as you can see here, it tells you to install Android Studio, and this is actually an old version. There is a later version than this. And you do need to install Git, and we will also cover how we need to use Git in the class as well. Um, so go through this instructions and the we're going to be primarily using VS Code or Visual Studio Code in this lecture series. So be sure to also install Visual Studio Code. So if you follow the instructions on how to download and install Visual Studio Code. So after you go through all these instructions, then you also need to go through the steps of installing the Android Studio to your computer. And we will kind of all review all these steps all together, and then I will show you what are some of the basic steps that you should be able to do once your computer is set up. Okay. So this is the web page for installing Android Studio. So you need to install the right version that you need. So whether you're using a Mac or installing for Windows, you'll install the right one for yourself. So if you go to this page using Windows, you'll see for Windows instead. Okay. All right. So that will be primarily the section on this particular part of the lecture, at least the first part of this lecture. And then I will show you after we have everything set up, what is the first thing that we want to be able to do. Okay, after we have Android Studio and Visual Studio and the Flutter toolkit installed, and you will see links to in this lecture of the other video lectures on getting the Flutter installed and also getting the Android Studio installed on your computer. So once you do have Flutter installed on your computer, then you should be able to type Flutter and hit enter in your command prompt inside of the Visual Studio. So to get to here, let me just close this. And then you'll see this button here on the top, the middle one with the panel on the bottom. And you want to be able to, you'll see multiple tabs here on the bottom, go to terminal. And then here on the bottom, you just want to be able to get to your directory where you want to create your Flutter project. And if you just type Flutter, you will see a response like this on your command line. And it will show you this kind of response when you type Flutter. The Flutter that I'm using right now is the current version, which is this one here. Um, so whatever it is, we should try to stay as close to this version as possible. So let's create our first Flutter project. Typing Flutter, create, and I'm going to say lesson 1. Okay. And depending if you have an Apple development account, it will say this, and then you want to be able to just go into the lesson directory. Oops, I mistyped that. And then you can then, if you have Visual Studio installed with the code, with Visual Studio code on the command line, you should be able to go into that new directory and then type code, and then with the period, which will open up a new Visual Studio window with that directory. So that here. Okay. Now that we have this open, we will now be able to open up this main Dart here. And you will see here on the top that this gray out options of run, debug, and profile will eventually show up after your Visual Studio realizes that this is a Flutter project. Okay, and then here on the bottom right, you will see the different types of targets or platforms that you want to be able to build this project for. And it's currently configured to use my iPhone, but we're going to select the Pixel 8 or the Android simulator here. Just a warning that if you are using Microsoft Windows um, on the ARM processor, that the Android Studio will not work, but you will have to connect it to a real Android device. But since this is a Mac, the Android Studio emulator works on this computer. So here the Android Studio will come up. And the instructions of how to set up your development environment to have Android Studio emulator up and running is in the comment section or the description section for this lecture series. So now that we have the Android Studio up and running, if you click on Run, okay, that's going to open up this debug console, and it will show you the progress of compiling this Flutter project for the Android simulator. And just take a few minutes to compile, and depending on the speed of your computer. And then here you see the Android app up and running. And a couple of things to keep in mind here, what you see on the screen. So of course, this here on the sort of the understanding the layout of how Visual Studio lays this out. This left side is the Project Explorer. And if you click on different buttons here, go to different kinds of views on this left panel. So the ones to kind of keep in mind the most time is the Project Explorer and the source code panel that we'll learn more about. And then, so here, if you expand out the lib folder, that's how we opened up the source code for the main.dart, and we're able to see this option here. Now, when you are running or debugging a Flutter application, this widget inspector will open, and then you can see the hierarchical view of the application here. And if you open up and expand out this, you can see that the main sort of structures of the application, and we'll kind of delve more into this in this lecture series. And you can see that this window here is your containing the scaffold with the text of you have pushed this button many times, the counter, and then you'll see the floating button here, just here. And then you'll see the app bar here with the title of Flutter demo homepage. And if you click on this multiple times, you'll see this number changing. And then you also see on there on the bottom that you will see what's happening in the development panel or the debug panel of this application. Okay, so that's what we want to be able to cover up to this point.